How are you? This is time for another Bhagavad Gita video, and you might remember in the last one, which was verses 20 to 26 of chapter 3, we were looking at this question of why is it that Krishna is required to, and that other people need to go through the duties of performing their actions in the world and also their spiritual practices when, even if they have an advanced state of awareness. And now here, Krishna continues on this theme. He elaborates on it somewhat, but he kind of takes it off to one side now and is looking at explaining the bigger purpose of things, right? He pointed out in the last verse of the previous section, he said, they must not strive to lead the foolish away from awareness. They should not give the foolish cause to avoid working. So here's where he's going to elaborate a little bit on this. And today we're doing chapter 3, verses 27 to 29. In the material world, the Gunas cause all kinds of activities to occur. Deluded by the ego, the soul believes that he is the one who is acting. But the one who knows truth, great warrior, he understands the gunas and karma and the difference between the senses and that which is sensed. With this perspective, he will avoid attachment. These elements of reality, that is the gunas, will delude people, and they will become attached to actions and desires in the material world. These people are either lacking in wisdom or they are lazy. One who is wise should not try to disturb them. So I think this is a very interesting little set of verses there, especially the conclusion that he reaches. He says, look, people who are so caught up in their attachments, in their desires, they're stuck in this world of being reactive to these elements of change, which I'm going to explain a little more about in a second. You shouldn't even bother trying to disturb them, right? You shouldn't be trying to wake them up or something like that, because they're not in a place where they can do that. And on the contrary, they could end up getting all the wrong messages out of it. And that explains a lot of the things that go very wrong in kind of spiritual movements. Because if you don't start with the fundamentals of the idea of a spiritual discipline, if you don't start with the fundamental of meditation and of the practice of awareness, then everything else is going to end up being skewed around in some way or another. It's going to be distorted and will usually end up being counterproductive. It'll become part of that trap of the gunas rather than a means of escape. Now, the gunas, to review again, are the three elements. They're the three processes that are described in Indian mysticism, right? So they are tamas, rajas, and sattvas, which can be described as heaviness, as fieriness, and then as truth. And they correspond to the three elements of alchemy in the West, which are salt, sulfur, and mercury. So one is of this kind of very deep animal stagnation, the deep act of being driven completely through baser instincts, right? It's that lowness state, right? That's salt, that's tamas, right? Another one is that of the fiery state, that state of being excited, of being passionate, right? Not of being kind of just low and moving along by these very basic functions, but of being highly driven by your passions, by your emotions, by your desires, being in an ecstatic kind of state. And that's rajas, that's sulfur, right? You're all fired up, literally. And then there's sattvas, or mercury, which is this state of fluidity and of clarity, right? And that's why it's truth. Sattvas is truthfulness, right? The state of truth. Now, in some part of Indian tradition, there was this concept that the point was to get away from the lower gunas and get to that higher guna, and if you were in that higher guna, then everything would be great, right? But all three of the gunas, Krishna has established, are actually this cycle, right? And they're all, you can't escape from any of the three. You always have characteristics of all three within you. And so there's no getting out of it. There's no purifying yourself until you're this pure, perfect entity, right? And if that's the goal, you're gonna mess it up, right? So instead, what Krishna deals with, and what he talks about, is how to work within the fact that you are stuck within these processes, right? These processes and cycles and these different natures of yourself, right? That there's a part of you that is animal. There's a part of you that is you could say human, this emotion-driven, instinct-driven, but human. And then there's a part of you that is this divine clarity, this state of awareness, right? And there's a part of you that's bad, and there's a part of you that's neutral, and there's a part of you that's good, right? There's all these different trinities associated with the gunas. So Krishna says here that the gunas cause all kinds of activities to occur. Deluded by the ego, the soul believes he is the one who is acting. What he means here is that these gunas, these different drives, the drive towards this kind of baseness, base instincts, the drive towards passions, being driven by passions, and even the drive towards nobility, you could say, or goodness, or whatever, with that clarity, all of those actually are manipulating you, and you believe that you're the one taking the action. So you think you're free, but you're not. So the soul thinks that it's the one that's taking action, when actually you're a victim reacting to, you're actually doing a reaction to different circumstances and parts of your psyche that well up within you, right? People often want to imagine that, you know, their emotions are something that belongs to them, right? That it's something internal, right? We tend to think of our emotions as internal. But if you imagine emotion as something that can sweep over you, right? That you can catch an emotion the way you could catch a cold, then it becomes a little more clear that what's really going on is that there are these states that come upon you, and then you believe that you're the one that is owning them, right? So it's like somebody falls in love, and all of his friends know that he's acting like an idiot because he's in love, right? So he's making all these kind of stupid mistakes, or he's rushing to something that he should probably stop and think about, or what have you. But he believes that he's got this great clarity, and everything makes sense now because he's in love, right? So he's in love with this girl, or she's in love with this guy, and suddenly the whole world is laid out before their eyes, and now everything makes sense, and so you're going to go and do these crazy things. And in a different sense, it can be the same, if a person is drunk, right? I'm sure we've all seen somebody who's drunk and insists that they're not, or high and insists that they're not, and that they're convinced that they're being a completely rational actor at this time, but they're not really. Well, all of life is like that. Everything in existence are these different forces that go through you and act upon you, right? So one who knows truth understands the gunas and the karmas. He doesn't overcome them. The difference between senses and what is being sensed. And through this perspective, you can avoid attachment. If you're able to have that sense of awareness that comes out of the process of a spiritual discipline, then you can act in a different way. It transforms how you act. But without this, then you can't, right? You're a victim of circumstances. So these elements of reality, the gunas, they will delude people. People will become attached to actions and desires in the material world. And so these people could be lacking in wisdom, or they could be lazy, right? Because there's two different ways that you get caught up in desire. And neither of it has much to do with the thing on the outside. Again, Krishna is saying here, it's not really about what's going on the outside. It's not about the thing you're desiring. It's not even about the feelings that you're having. It's about the desire itself, right? That is the issue that has to be redirected. The attachment to that desire, clinging to that desire. That's the problem, right? So there are the people that are lacking in wisdom, in the sense of generally unaware. They're not even at the level where they realize how much of what they're doing is actually not in their own control, in the sense of being true conscious decisions, but rather are letting themselves be manipulated by a variety of factors in reality to them. Or they're lazy. And what he means by lazy is that there are also people who become aware of these desires, people who have to some extent developed enough of their individuality, they've discovered enough of their psyche, be it through meditation or through other means, that they can understand what they're doing, and they keep doing it anyways, because the alternative is too hard. The rigor that is necessary to overcome that mentality is too difficult. So the best thing to do here is not to worry about that. So there is no good example that you can set by trying to convert people. You might be able to set a good example by how you live and act, but it's not going to be for the majority of people. The esoteric way is always a way that ends up working only for a minority. Some people might be drawn to you for the wrong reasons. Most people won't be drawn to you at all if what you're doing is something sincere. But there are very few people that you might be able to make a difference for. But the way to make that difference depends on you being able to show them a step-by-step path. If you're already in a state of awareness and you don't provide that emphasis on the discipline of the work, then what you're showing them is another kind of fantasy. You're saying, oh, well, all you have to do is just be a witness. Like Krishnamurti used to say, just be a witness and then everything will be there, right? Or like many of the Advaita teachers say, right? Oh, just realize that you are not this, right? And so that sort of method, it's not technically untrue, but it's not very helpful for the most part, because if you don't have the groundwork behind that and before that, it doesn't get you anywhere. That's everything for today. Oh, and if you like the video, please feel free to subscribe, follow this playlist, pass it on to others. Thank you.